Have you ever felt like you're searching for yourself in all the wrong places? Like, no matter how far you reach, through books, experiences, relationships, you end up staring into mirrors that reflect everything but your true self? We live in a world obsessed with identity. We label, optimize, define, and display who we think we are. And yet, beneath all the clarity, so many of us feel more lost than ever. Why? Walker Percy, in his razor-sharp satire Lost in the Cosmos, offers a haunting question. Why is the self, the modern self, though surrounded by everything it could ever need, the loneliest creature in the cosmos? In this video, we're going to explore 5 illusions, modern myths we're asked to believe, not from enemies, but from the world itself, culture, technology, therapy, self-help, all promising wholeness, but often leading us further from it. Because sometimes the most dangerous request you'll ever hear is, just be yourself, especially when no one ever taught you who or what that self really is. So, let's begin. 1. Pretending you know who you are. There's a strange confidence in modern culture. Everyone seems to know who they are. We post about it. We brand ourselves with it. We fill out bios with bullet points. Empath, coffee lover, INFJ, survivor, hustler. We wear identities like fashion, curated, controlled, complete. But, as Walker Percy asks bluntly and brilliantly, if we're all so self-aware, why are we so miserable? This is the modern paradox. The more ways we invent to find ourselves, the less we seem to actually know what a self even is. And when you scratch the surface of many confident declarations, you find confusion. We confuse personality with essence. We confuse preferences with purpose. We confuse visibility with intimacy. Percy suggests that the modern self is not only lost, but actively pretending it isn't. We're performers trapped on a stage we didn't design, reciting lines written by culture, media, trauma, and calling it authenticity. And here's the trap. People will ask you to pretend along with them. They'll say, know yourself, but what they really mean is, settle on something, be legible, be easy to categorize. Because mystery is inconvenient. Uncertainty makes others uncomfortable. Not knowing who you are means you're still growing, and growth is messy. But ask yourself, when did you last sit in your own presence and admit, I'm not sure who I am right now, not in a panic, not in a crisis, just as a statement of honesty? You'll be tempted to rush past that moment, to fill the space with a role, a project, a label. But that stillness, Percy argues, is where the real self begins to emerge. Not the self you market, not the self you fix, but the self that's been watching quietly this whole time, beneath all the noise. That's why Percy doesn't offer answers in Lost in the Cosmos. He offers questions, brutal, ironic, necessary questions. He knows that the self isn't a puzzle to be solved, but a presence to be met. And pretending you've already figured it out, that's how you drift further from yourself while claiming to be self-actualized. So, the next time someone asks you to define who you are, pause. Not every question needs an answer. Some just need honesty. You are not a set of traits. You are not a self-help slogan. You are not a product in search of better packaging. You are a mystery, a consciousness wrapped in skin, a soul that's still unfolding. And anyone who asks you to pretend otherwise is not asking for your truth. They're asking for your compliance. Don't give it to them. 2. Performing emotions for public approval. There's something deeply strange about modern life. We feel, but only when it's seen. We cry, but not without the urge to record. We heal, but only if there's a caption. We grieve, but part of us wonders what filter to use. And somewhere in this blurring of sincerity and spectacle, Walker Percy's voice cuts through the noise. Why is it that the self, surrounded by explanations and technologies and therapies, becomes more invisible the more it is displayed? Today, we don't just live our emotions, we curate them. We've been trained, quietly, consistently, to outsource our inner world to a public stage. Our sadness must be photogenic. Our joy must be documented. Our anxiety must be relatable. Our growth must be marketable. We live not just to feel, but to be seen feeling. And here's the tragedy. When we perform our emotions, we risk losing our ability to actually feel them. We start editing grief for coherence. We start scripting authenticity. We start measuring pain and engagement metrics. The moment you ask, "How will this look?" instead of "How do I feel?" you've already left the truth behind. And people will encourage this. They'll tell you how brave you are for sharing your story, even if you haven't had time to process it. They'll reward your vulnerability as long as it fits the format. But Percy would ask, who are you when there is no audience? Do your feelings matter if no one validates them? In Lost in the Cosmos, Percy creates a brilliant parody of the modern self-help seeker, a person convinced they are emotionally sophisticated because they can explain their inner life in detail. But the twist? The explanation is all they have. The actual self, messy, raw, unknown, has gone missing. We've become fluent in emotional language, but fluency is not the same as honesty, and self-expression is not the same as self-awareness. And that's what makes this modern performance so seductive. It feels like connection, but it's actually exhibition. It feels like healing, but it's actually approval-seeking. It feels like intimacy, but it's actually a feedback loop that conditions us to shape our most private feelings for the expectations of others. It's not that emotion should be hidden, it's that not all emotion should be displayed. Some feelings deserve to live in silence. Some pain is sacred in its solitude. Some joy is too pure to explain. You are allowed to feel things that don't make sense, to have emotions that don't align with your brand, to cry without knowing why, to be confused, angry, numb, or overjoyed without needing it to make a point. The people who truly love you don't need your feelings to be coherent or convenient. They just need them to be real. And the next time you feel something deeply, resist the urge to turn it into content. Let it be for you. Let it live and breathe and pass through you without needing to be shared, reshaped, or reacted to. Because when emotion becomes performance, the soul becomes audience, and your life becomes a stage where you are no longer the main character, just the actor. You don't owe the world your inner life. You owe yourself the space to actually live. I3. Chasing novelty instead of meaning. Modern life doesn't leave much room for stillness. We move, we scroll, we consume, we pivot. We take mindfulness classes on fast forward. We plan vacations to find ourselves, only to lose our phones. We dive into yoga, then leave early for networking brunch. We are obsessed with experience, and we're terrified of reflection. Walker Percy saw it coming. Why is the self so bored, so very bored, even when surrounded by every form of excitement, education, and entertainment? In Lost in the Cosmos, Percy doesn't condemn the search for meaning. He mocks the way we avoid meaning by endlessly seeking novelty. He saw that we treat our spiritual hunger like a buffet. We sample, we taste, we move on. We confuse the new with the deep. But novelty isn't nourishment. You can attend 20 retreats and still not sit with yourself. You can read 100 self-help books and never ask a real question. You can try therapy, breathwork, plant medicine, cold plunges, astrology, Enneagram, journaling, vision boards, and still feel like a stranger in your own skin. Because without integration, experience becomes distraction. We chase novelty because it gives us motion without direction, sensation without consequence. It lets us believe we're evolving when really, we're just escaping with flair. And people will ask you to chase with them. They'll say, come to this event, do this practice, follow this method, try this life hack. But Percy asks, what if the emptiness isn't a problem to fix, but a question to stay with? Most of us don't want transformation. We want relief. Relief from boredom, from grief, from confusion, from the unbearable silence of asking, why am I here? Who am I really? So we run. To the next idea, the next location, the next identity. But there's no escape from the self, only delay. In every new pursuit, if not rooted in intention, becomes another distraction dressed as progress. Percy tells the story of a modern seeker, a person who travels across the world for transcendence, yet cannot name the real ache inside. It's not that the journey is wrong, it's that we've forgotten why we began walking in the first place. So, be cautious of people who confuse restlessness with depth, who call themselves seekers, but never stay still long enough to be found. Ask yourself, Are you chasing wonder, or are you running from silence? Are you seeking the sacred, or just addicted to the new? Because meaning does not arrive in spectacular flashes. It builds slowly, like sediment. It whispers, it lingers, it roots. And often it arrives not after the next adventure, but in the moment you stop needing one. You're not behind. You're not late to your life. You don't need more retreats, more teachings, more tips. You need stillness. You need courage. You need the quiet permission to go inward without needing to post about it. Novelty will always dazzle, but only meaning can hold you. Only meaning can change you. 4. Reducing the soul to a set of data. We live in an age of measurement. We track our steps. We monitor our sleep. We log our moods, journal our habits, scan our brains. We wear watches that know our heart better than we do. And somewhere along the way, the mystery of being human was traded in for analytics. Walker Percy looked at this future and asked, what happens to a soul when it becomes a statistic? What happens when your sadness is labeled a chemical imbalance? Your personality is reduced to 4 letters. Your essence is assigned a number on a sliding scale. We were told that knowledge is power, that if we could measure everything, we could master ourselves. But Percy saw something else. What if the self becomes so explained, so categorized, so efficiently analyzed, that it disappears altogether? Because what's left of a soul once you've charted it like a weather report? What becomes of mystery when every feeling must be tracked, tagged, optimized? This is the tragedy of our time. We have more tools to understand ourselves than ever before, and yet we feel more alienated from ourselves than any generation in history. Because the soul was never meant to be processed like data. It was never meant to be useful, predictable, monetized. And yet, people will ask you to fit the mold. They'll say, take this quiz, upload your genome, match your therapy to your attachment style, map your trauma and track your triggers. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with knowing your patterns, there is something deeply wrong with thinking that's all you are. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your productivity level. You are not the sum of your routines. The data may describe your behavior, but it will never contain your being. Because no spreadsheet can capture the ache you feel in the dark when no one's watching. No metric can quantify the joy of a laugh that came out of nowhere. No algorithm can predict the moment you suddenly feel like yourself again. In Lost in the Cosmos, Percy introduces the last self-help book, not to help you fix your life, but to disorient you back into reality. He doesn't want to simplify your soul. He wants to shake it awake, to ask, what if the reason you feel invisible is because you've let the world define you in numbers and traits too small for what you are? You are not a project. You are not a performance. You are not a glitch in a system waiting to be debugged. You are a question, a consciousness, a walking paradox made of both stardust and story. The deeper tragedy is this. The more you define yourself by data, the more you stop believing in mystery. And when the mystery dies, so does wonder. So does reverence. So does soul. So beware of the ones who only want to explain you. The ones who need you to be predictable. The ones who ask for your numbers, but never ask about your silence. Not everything meaningful can be measured, and not everything measurable is meaningful. Sometimes the most human thing you can do is resist the urge to know yourself too efficiently, to leave some questions unanswered, to let some parts of you remain wild, uncertain, and unnamed, because it's in that vast unmapped territory, where Percy's voice still echoes, that you finally begin to encounter the soul. 5. Confusing. Escape with enlightenment. There's a strange, quiet illusion shaping the modern soul. It whispers, if it's uncomfortable, it's toxic. If it's painful, walk away. If it doesn't feel good, it's not for you. And so, we leave. We leave relationships when they get too real. We leave ideas when they get too hard. We leave silence when it gets too loud. And somewhere along the way, we stop growing, but we call it healing. We stop engaging, but we call it boundaries. We stop listening, but we call it alignment. Walker Percy saw it clearly, long before Instagram mantras and curated spirituality. The self becomes so advanced, so therapeutic, so enlightened, he writes, that it becomes allergic to the very friction that might save it. We live in a culture that has confused escape with enlightenment. that sees discomfort not as a teacher, but as an error, that treats the inner journey like a vacation, optional, enjoyable, always pleasant. But real transformation doesn't feel like a wellness retreat. It feels like dying a little, like shedding an old skin that you thought was you. You see, growth isn't always graceful. Sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes it's full of doubt, fear, resistance. Sometimes the breakthrough feels like a breakdown. But today's world doesn't want you to wait through the dark night. It wants you to skip to the glow-up. So you'll be told, detach from what drains you. Protect your peace. Raise your vibration. And yes, some of that is true. But Percy would ask, are you running toward freedom or just away from pain? There's a kind of spiritual bypassing that looks like wisdom. It uses language that sounds deep but lacks roots. It offers the illusion of awakening, but without the awakening part. It skips the struggle. It edits the shadow. It promises transcendence, but only if you never look too closely at what's being transcended. In Lost in the Cosmos, Percy offers a brutal question. What if the very emptiness you're trying to escape is the place where meaning is trying to reach you? Because sometimes meaning doesn't knock. It waits. It waits for you to stop running, to stop performing, to stop optimizing your life long enough to actually feel it. The truth is, you don't find yourself in perfect environments. You find yourself when you stop demanding that the environment be perfect. You don't reach enlightenment by skipping the valley. You reach it by walking through the fog with your eyes open. So, be wary of any voice, within or without, that tells you to run from difficulty and call it peace. Because peace isn't the absence of struggle. It's what's waiting on the other side of your willingness to face it. If every time you feel uncertain, you flee, you don't become free, you become fragile. If every time life gets hard, you reframe it as a sign to leave, you miss the invitation hidden inside the pain. So, stay. Stay long enough in your discomfort to ask what it's trying to show you. Stay long enough in your doubt to see if it leads to deeper truth. Stay long enough in your confusion to let mystery speak. Because real enlightenment doesn't liberate you from life. It grounds you inside it. And when that happens, when you stop running, you'll notice something. The fear begins to quiet. The silence starts to feel holy. And what looked like darkness was actually the space where your soul was growing new eyes. So these 5 cultural lies, false certainty, emotional performance, novelty addiction, reductionism, and spiritual escapism have one thing in common. They distract you from the mystery of your own existence. And when you lose touch with the mystery, you become easier to sell to, manipulate, and define. Ask yourself, who around you demands clarity before curiosity? Who asks you to define yourself, but not to know yourself? You're not obligated to have all the answers. You're not a brand, you're not a product. You are allowed to be a question. This isn't weakness, it's wisdom. This isn't failure, it's freedom. So now I want to hear from you. Which of these modern traps have you encountered in your own life? How has Lost in the Cosmos or your own journey helped you resist the pull? Leave a comment below and write the word mystery if you made it to the end. It tells me you're not just watching, you're awakening. And if this spoke to you, subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who's tired of being a self-help project and just wants to be a person again. Until next time, resist the noise. Embrace the mystery. It's the most human thing you can do.